Hi guys, I'm Fishman2114, and today we're going to be doing another tier list video. So the last tier list video actually was really good. I really thought it was a good video overall, and I think a lot of you guys thought the same thing. So I wanted to do another one. Today we're going to be doing fish that I would like to keep. So these are fish that I've never kept. I know a good amount about all of them to be included in the list, but I've never kept them, and really it's about how much I want to keep them or don't want to keep them, and what ones fall in between that. So to get right into the tiers, at S tier we have bucket list. This is top of the top. These are fish that I really do want to keep, and this list as a whole is more of just a personal thing. So there's nothing wrong with any of the fish on the list, but this is more personal preference of what I want to keep. So at S tier, these are the fish that I will most definitely be having sometime in the future. Below that in A tier is really want. They're not quite S tier, but they're really solid fish, and I would love to have them. I would really love to have them. Below that, we have B tier, that's will take. It's a solid B tier, there's nothing wrong with them. They're not quite S or A tier, but I would definitely take them if I had the space or there was a good deal on them or etc. Below that in C tier is fairly want. I would take them especially if there was a good deal or they were even free. If I had the space, I would fairly want them, but I'm not going to go crazy over them or anything like that. In D tier, I like to call it I'd maybe take for free. It's as the name suggests, I'd maybe take these fish for free, or even a really, really, really good deal, but it's D tier basically, very meh. And then below that we have do not want and will never have. So do not want, there's about, I'd say, a 90% chance that I'll never have those fish, but I'd call that E tier. But then an F tier is just flat out, I will never have. There's a 0% chance I will ever have these fish. So to start, we have the Borneo sucker loach. So for those that didn't watch the previous tier list video I did, I put the rankings in the middle of the tier, and then I talk about them a bit, and I move them up or down accordingly to that. So I'll start putting them in fairly want, and we'll move them up or down. So the Borneo sucker loach is very similar to hillstream loaches, and I already have hillstream loaches, so there are differences. The hillstream loaches are more of a yellow and black, where the Borneos, primarily their color is brown, but they have those yellow spots. And the Borneos don't get as large as the hillstream loaches. They're a lot more narrow actually. When you look at a hillstream and a Borneo next to each other, the Borneos are a lot more narrow. But they still have the similar stingray-like structures. I know some people call them guitar fish or whatnot, and they are different. They're very similar though. They're very similar body shape, similar coloration. They're very similar fish. But really the main draw of the Borneos is that they're smaller, and I think they are friendlier with each other than compared to hillstreams, because I know hillstreams definitely circle and chase and fight. So I do like these guys, but at the moment I'm kind of satisfied with my hillstream loaches. I definitely would like to have them in the future, but I have my hillstream loaches right now, and I enjoy them, so I don't really have much of a need to have a Borneo sucker loach just because they're so similar and just in general, honestly. So I'm going to put them in will take. I do like them. I have seen them. I've thought about getting them, but at the end of the day, I picked the hillstreams over them. So I will take them, and I will most likely have them in the future, but I am pretty satisfied with the hillstream loaches. So yeah, I think that's a pretty fair ranking for them. Next up, we have the bristlenose pleco. Now this one's an albino one, but really any bristlenose will do. So bristlenose, I mean, as the name suggests, the main feature of the bristlenose compared to other plecos is the protrusions on their noses, which are called bristles, I guess. So these plecos are probably second most common, the first being the common pleco, the small little gray ones you see at pet stores or whatnot. But those ones get absolutely massive, and most people don't realize how large those ones get. These guys typically get, I mean, some of them can get large, but I think the majority of them can get like 5 inches max or whatnot, and they're really good breeders. I know my uncle actually breeds bristlenoses, so this is a fish I could theory get for free because he has so many of them. But at the moment, I'm pretty satisfied without one, but I would like to have one, or maybe even a breeding pair or party of them in the future. They are pretty cool. I think they're probably up there with plecos. They might be the pleco I want the most. I'm not the biggest pleco person. I think there are better algae eaters, and I don't like larger fish. But I think the bristlenose is probably the pleco I'd want the most. So I'm going to put them also in will take, but I'm going to put them below the Borneo. They're pretty cool, and I think it would be kind of fun to breed them, but I think I'd rather take the Borneo over them. So I think B tier is also a fair ranking for the bristlenose pleco. Next up, we have, okay, so this is a cardinal tetra. So I know somebody out there is probably just thinking this is a neon tetra, but for anyone that doesn't know, cardinal tetras are a bit different than neons. They get typically a ½ inch larger. I think their max is about 2 inches, maybe a bit more. And really, the only other noticeable difference between cardinals and neons is the red. Cardinal tetras their stomachs are almost completely red. As you can see, kind of that whole side is red, where neons, about half of the belly would be red, typically more towards the tail is red, and then more towards the front of the fish is clear, or a white as I like to put it. And I think it's pretty cool. I know this fish is very popular and it has its fans, but I have a bit of a controversial take with it, I suppose, that I think I kind of like the color on neons a bit better. I kind of like how half of the belly is white and the other half is red, as opposed to the cardinal tetra's full red belly. But I know these fish are a bit hardier than neon tetras, and I mean they are a bit larger. So that is pretty cool. I think those are some pretty high pros for the cardinal tetras. Now, I am pretty happy right now with neon tetras, but I think maybe one day in the future I could see having some cardinal tetras, but I am happy with my neons I have right now. So I'm going to put them in really want, actually. I know that might surprise some people with kind of some of the negatives I was talking about, but I think it's just my personal opinion. I think the color on neons look better, but if I had a larger tank and it was a bit more green with some greenery plants and all that, I think these guys could look amazing, and I think their larger size and their hardiness especially would really intrigue me on them. So I am going to put them in really want. I think there is a place for them. Maybe I could even mix them with neons. We'll see. I'd have to do more research. But I would really want cardinals. They are pretty cool. I just think I might prefer neons more. So next up, I know this picture didn't turn out great, but this is a black coolie loach. So it's very similar to a regular, it's pretty much the same as a regular coolie loach, but it's just kind of a dull black color. And I think there might be some other slight differences, but I don't have them, so I wouldn't know. And honestly, I'm going to leave them right there in fairly want. They are pretty cool, and I don't know if you could mix them with other coolie loaches, the regular kind that I have. I would assume you could, but I'd want to make sure that there's enough of a school of them for each species to feel comfortable. And I just like the normal coolie loaches. I like the orange, I like the black on the normal ones, and these ones just feel really dull compared to that. Now, I know these black coolie loaches have their fans. My younger brother actually prefers the black coolie loaches over the regular ones. He has more black than regular coolie loaches. So I know they definitely have their fans, and I would definitely consider dipping my toes in the black coolie loaches, but I'm going to keep them right there in fairly want. I think it's a fair place to put them. They are pretty cool, but I like the normal coolie loaches better. So I'm gonna keep them right there in fairly one. So after the black coolie loaches, we have, oh, so this is an African clawed frog. This one's albino, but it's pretty much the same as a normal one, just it's albino compared to the brownish coloration. I'm going to be honest, it's basically just a big African dwarf frog, and it just needs a lot of room. I don't know the minimum tank size, as I don't really have a desire to keep this frog, but I believe it's at least 50 gallons, if not more. These things get big. These guys get really big, and you pretty much can only keep on other African dwarf frogs with them, or clawed frogs with them. Don't keep dwarf frogs with clawed frogs. I don't know. It's just, I don't really want to keep it. I cannot see myself ever having one. It just, I like a lot of smaller fish as compared to one big thing, in this case a frog. So I would feel if I ever had one, it was just a big waste of room that I could be having a school of cardinal tetras and Borneo suckers. This thing is just a big fat frog that kind of just sits around, and just you have to keep it by itself. I'm pretty sure they're quite messy. You can't really do much hardscape with it because it could damage it. It's just not my thing. I don't think aquatic frogs are really my thing. I like frogs a lot. I just think I don't care for aquatic frogs as much as, say, regular frogs. So I don't think I'd ever want to keep one as a pet. I'm going to put it in will never have. I'm pretty confident I'm never going to have a clawed frog. They're just big. They're lazy. They're kind of cool looking, but they're not my favorite kind of frog out there. I like other kinds of frogs, so they don't even have that going for them. So I'm gonna put them in will never have. You guys will never see me have one of these. So yeah, I don't know if there's any African clawed frog big fans out there, but sorry to disappoint you. Nothing wrong with them, just not my thing. Alright, after the clawed frog, we have, so this is just the common goldfish. It's pretty much a common, regular goldfish. There are a feeder goldfish, but people actually keep them in ponds, and they can get quite large. They also are invasive, so please, please, please do not let these fish into the wild if you do have any. But I'm not the biggest goldfish person. I just think they're kind of messy. They don't mix with tropical fish very well because they like colder temperatures. Not freezing, but not really heater water. So they aren't really high on my bucket list, but I could see myself having a pond with these guys, and they are really cheap. So they aren't expensive at all. They're very cheap. I mean, they're feeder fish for a reason. But they're not very healthy. A lot of them just die. And yeah, they're kind of just your standard goldfish. I could see, like I said, I could see myself having a pond and having some of these guys in there, and they do go very well with koi because they don't get quite as large as the koi, but you could definitely have them and you don't have to worry about the koi doing anything. They're very peaceful fish, but they're just messy, and they're just kind of your standard goldfish. So I'm going to put them in D tier. Maybe I'll take for free. I know they're not free or whatnot, but they're dirt cheap. I think at the last pet store I worked, I think you could get 6 of them for $1. So I'm going to put them in D tier. They're not really anything I'm looking for. Maybe I'd take them for free, you know. It's kind of that sort of thing. Below that, we are going to have the specialty goldfish. So I wanted to have a separate ranking for these goldfish because they're very different. These goldfish, a lot of times they're very deformed. I know there's the bubble goldfish that have the huge cheeks. There's the ones that have the big eyes. This one kind of has the growths on its head, and they're not really healthy fish. We've selectively bred them to have these deformities that we find cute, and I really am not a fan of it. Now, these ones I wouldn't keep outside in a pond. They don't get as large and they just don't live as healthy. So this is definitely a tank fish. And because of that, I'm going to put them below the comet goldfish and do not want, because you really need a tank for them. They're definitely an indoor pet compared to a comet. But I just don't like the deformities. We have made these fish just deformed, and they don't live the best lives, unfortunately. They're pretty comparable to pugs in that we've selectively bred them to be deformed, and we think it's cute. But I honestly don't think it's cute. I think it's kind of horrific. And yeah, I'm going to put them in do not want. I would say if I had a spare tank lying around and there were some people giving away for free, I would consider doing a rescue for some of these goldfish. But like I've said about the comet goldfish, that they're messy, they don't go with tropical fish, you really need a tank of just goldfish. So I'm going to put them in do not want. I don't think it's an F tier per se, even with all the deformities and whatnot. I think I would consider rescuing them, but I am going to put them in do not want. They're not something I'm looking for. It's something that might just happen in the future, but most likely won't. So next up, we have, this is an Oscar. Now, Oscars are big fish. This is the only quote monster fish on the list, because I am really not a monster fish person, but I will admit even I like Oscars. They are very pretty fish. Now, I think kind of like the clawed frog, I value smaller fish. I'd like when I see larger fish in those big monster tanks with huge fish, I always just think of how much a small fish could fit in there. Like how many schools of tetras could you have? How many nice, beautiful angelfish could you have in there? That sort of thing. I just feel monster fish are kind of over-exaggerated, overhyped. I'm not really a monster fish guy. I prefer small community tanks. But like I said, even I like Oscars. They are very cool fish. They are a very beautiful color. I like the black ones over the albino ones, but even the albino ones are quite cool. Just the black and the orange go very well together, and they are a large fish. I believe the minimum size for an Oscar was 100 gallons. It could even be 120. They are a big fish, but I know people that do have them. It's pretty much the family dog, just in a fish tank. They're very personal fish. They get very attached to you. If you have a nice one, you have a nice one, and they're very funny fish and very personal fish. So people do treat it like the family dog. And I'm going to also leave the Oscar and Fairly Want. I'm going to keep them there. I would consider an Oscar, but I don't think it's going to happen just because I like community tanks, and if I had a 120, 150, it would just be an Oscar, and I would feel kind of like I could have had so much more. I kind of like the community side of the aquariums rather than just the monster fish. I'd rather have a bunch of schools of fish and just bunch of angelfish, bunch of gouramis, whatever I want to put in there compared to just one fish, if that makes sense. So I'm going to keep them in Fairly Want. They're a cool fish, but it's just not really my side of the hobby, but I wanted to include it in the list just to explain to you guys. Next up, we have, this is a peacock gudgeon. Now, this is a fish that I'm going to say right off the bat is definitely on the bucket list. So we're going to put it up in S. I think it's just a really cool fish. I think it looks beautiful. It's kind of an oddball fish. It almost looks like a goby of some kind. It's a very unique shape. I like the fin structure. Like I said, I like the color. And it's a smaller fish, so you could have it. I've heard people keeping them in a 5-gallon, but by themselves. So I think a 10-gallon with a small community tank, nano fish and whatnot, but this being your centerpiece fish, would be a really fantastic idea. I really want to keep them. It's kind of like an alternative to a betta fish, and one day I would like to keep these guys a lot. They're very beautiful fish. I have done a lot of research on them. I considered getting it, very, very close to getting them, but I ended up not getting them. So definitely an S tier. I want to have one day. I might even do a designated tank for these guys. They're very, very cool fish. I just really enjoy peacock gudgeons. Next up, we have, this is a pearl danio or celestial danio, or I've heard them called galaxy rasboras. I believe it's a danio, but people call them rasboras too, so it's a bit confusing there. But this is a true nano fish. This is perfect for like a 10-gallon tank. I don't think I would put them in a 5-gallon because they are danios, so they are very active, very moving. They're constantly moving. I've talked about danios before, and a lot of times that's not my favorite. But I will say, I think because these are truly nano fish, these are tiny fish. They are like an inch at most. I think they're half an inch. They are tiny, tiny fish. They're not even an inch. But the combination of their really fantastic, vibrant color, I mean, you can see in the picture that there's a reason they're called galaxy rasboras, and that their body almost looks like a galaxy. Their base color is this deep blue, almost a black, with all these little white spots, and then the orange fins. It looks fantastic. They are a very beautiful fish, and I think they would be perfect for a nano tank. So I do really want them. I don't think they're quite S tier, but I am going to definitely put them above the Cardinal Tetra. This is a bucket, not a bucket list, but this is close to a bucket list fish. They're cool. They're a pretty perfect nano fish in that, like I've talked about danios and how they're not exactly my favorite because they kind of move around a lot, but I think in a nano setting that's actually kind of valued. I think a lot of nano fish are a bit more shy, and I know these fish do shy away and they do need their hiding places, but they seem to be more active than other nano species, like compared to a chili rasbora. So I do like them. I like their color, and I like their lifestyle, their constant patrolling in nano environment. So I am going to put them in really want. This is definitely my favorite danio out there by far. So yeah, pearl danio, celestial danio, celestial rasbora, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to put an A tier. Next up, we have the pearl gourami. So funny enough, this is actually very similar looking to a celestial danio in that it has a bunch of little white speckles on it. Now, I've never owned this gourami, hence why it's on the list, but I think it's absolutely gorgeous looking. I mean, kind of the blue, streamlined look to it, the long, elegant fins, and then obviously they mentioned all those little white spots. It's just a very unique gourami. There's no gourami that looks quite like it. And they are a relatively, quote, larger one. They're not like a kissing gourami or a giant gourami by any means, but they're kind of comparable to an opaline gourami in size. So they definitely are a good centerpiece for like a 40, 50-gallon tank. A 30-gallon would work too. So I'm going to put them on the bucket list. I don't think I want them more than a peacock gudgeon, but they definitely are a very cool gourami, and as you know, I am a big gourami fan, so a nice, beautiful pearl gourami would be absolutely welcomed in my list. So I'm going to put them in S tier. I think they deserve it. Very cool gourami. They seem to have a good temperament overall, and I just love gourami, so a new species of gourami would definitely be on the bucket list for me. Alright, so we're on to the last 3 fish of the list. Next up, we have... Alright, so this is another specialty pleco. This is a Starry Night pleco, but I've also heard people call them vampire plecos. So, continuing on the theme of white spots, this is a dark pleco, pretty much midnight black, with just covered in white spots. Hence, that's why I know it as a midnight pleco or a Starry Night pleco. So, they are pretty cool. I'm kind of a sucker for the white spots. I think they look cool. but plecos aren't exactly my favorite. I've kind of mentioned it with the bristlenose pleco. So it's not something that I incredibly want, and I have talked about how the bristlenose is probably the pleco I would have if I had anything, but I think I would fairly want a Starry Night pleco. They are beautiful, and I think it would be kind of fun to have one in a tank, so I will keep it in fairly want. I'm going to put it above the Oscar, but not above the Black Coolie Loach. Up next, we have the Rummy Nose Tetra. So, I'm going to say it up front. This is the fish. The reason I made this tier list is because of this fish. It is going to the top of the bucket list. I absolutely adore the Rummy Nose Tetra. It's going to go number one. Now, there's just something about this fish that I just love. It's a tetra, but it has a completely different shape than your average tetra. It looks more like a torpedo than anything. It's not like a neon or any of the long flowing fin tetras. This one is very streamlined. It's very fast. It's very similar to a Danio in that it darts around the tank, so it definitely needs a big space, but there's just something about it that I love. Now, another cool thing about this fish is that the red on its face, as you can see, depending on how it's very much reactant to water conditions. So if you have good water conditions, your rummy nose's faces, their red blotches are going to be very bright and vibrant. Whereas if you had poor water condition, they would be very dull. And I think that's really cool in that it gauges your water parameters and it lets you know how healthy your water is. I think that's a very cool fact about this thing. And just, I mean, the clear body's pretty cool, but I also just really like that tail, that almost checkered flag race car type tail. It fits the aesthetic of the fish, and it's just cool. I think it's a really cool fish. I'd really love to have a big school of these one day. And finally, for the last fish on the list, we have another pleco. This is a zebra pleco. So once again, it's a black and white pleco. It's very similar to the Starry Night or the Vampire pleco here, and that it's black and white. But as you can tell, it's more striped. It looks like a zebra, hence the name. And I believe these guys only get about 5 inches max. I believe. I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I believe they are on the smaller end. They're definitely not growing huge. So you could have them in like a 40-gallon tank or whatnot, maybe even a 30. They're cool. They're cool. I don't think they're anything to write home about. I think I'm going to keep them in fairly want. I like the striped patterning, though. I think it's a pretty cool design. I'm actually going to put this at the top of fairly want. I believe it's cooler than a Black Coolie Loach. I think the colors are more vibrant. It's more eye-catching, more appealing. I think it's a cool looking fish. So I'll put it in fairly want. I've gone over plecos before. I just wanted to include some on the list, but there's not really much else to put in that. I just think its coloration is cooler than the Starry Night, and I believe it gets a bit. Doesn't get as large, so that is a plus in my eyes. So yeah, there we go. This is the list of fish that I would like to keep. Obviously, some of them I don't, but overall, most of these fish expect to see in the future, honestly, especially the ones up in S and A tier. These fish are most likely I'm going to have. I might not end up with the ones below B tier, but they are on my mind. So there you go. That is another tier list for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be back with another one in the future, and take care, guys.